Greetings, this is Bonafide. Now, Kenya and Djibouti are still locked in a diplomatic row over who is going to produce the next AUC chairman. Now, the AUC chairmanship is not just about a title. This is a very serious institution that governs or leads Africa to the next destination. Just the other day on Tuesday, Raila Odinga was endorsed by the EAC leaders. We know that Somalia might decide to vote for another candidate. We know that the Democratic Republic of Congo might decide to vote for another country. Mahamoud Youssef, of course, from Djibouti, will woo the votes of the countries that are neighboring Djibouti, more so in the Horn of Africa. There are a lot of countries in West Africa and many countries in Central Africa that speak French. Greetings, this is Bonafide. Now, Kenya and Djibouti are still locked in a diplomatic row over who is going to produce the next AUC chairman. Kenya has Raila Odinga and Djibouti has Mahamoud Youssef as candidates that are fit for the AUC chairmanship. Now, the AUC chairmanship is not just about a title. This is a very serious institution that governs or leads Africa to the next destination. The AUC is an influential position. The country that is going to produce the next AUC means that Africa is going to abide by the philosophies that that leader is going to present. Of course, both of these leaders have their accolades. Raila Odinga has a very elaborate accolade in terms of how he presents Pan-African issues. He has been in the political realm for a very long time, knows about African problems, and even wanted to present himself as a president in Kenya for quite some time to solve African issues. On the other side, we have Mahamoud Youssef, who also has an extensive experience in terms of diplomacy. He has been the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Djibouti for quite some time. He has presented the issues that Djiboutians are facing across the world on how best to solve African problems from an African perspective. Basing on these two leaders, you have the experience that is needed to have a top leader at the AUC. But basing on the fact that the AUC chairmanship is not about a country, it's about individuals, it is important to note that the country plays a major role because at the end of the day, it is the country that is going to influence other countries so that they can vote for their particular leaders. And in that scope, regional dynamics come into play. By regional dynamics, we mean the organizations of regions across Africa. We have the EAC, we have the IGAD, we have ECOWAS, we have SADC, and Organization of Countries in the Central African States. So if you're looking at Raila Odinga, just the other day on Tuesday, Raila Odinga was endorsed by the EAC leaders. That means that as a bloc, the East African community will endorse Raila Odinga. We're not meaning that every country in the EAC bloc will vote for Raila Odinga, but majority of these countries. We know that Somalia might decide to vote for another candidate. We know that the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has had issues with Kenya over the deployment of Kenyan troops in DRC, might decide to vote for another country. But at the end of the day, major or many countries in the EAC, as was demonstrated in Tuesday when different presidents came here, that means that the EAC as a bloc will vote for Raila Odinga's candidacy for the AUC. On the other side, you have Mahamoud Youssef. Mahamoud Youssef, of course, from Djibouti, will woo the votes of the countries that are neighboring Djibouti, more so in the Horn of Africa, as well as countries that resonate with it in terms of being in an organization of countries. And for this, we mean that countries that are mostly in IGAD and not close to Kenya. So countries like, for example, Eritrea, countries like Somalia, countries like Sudan and Ethiopia might go to the side of Djibouti. And this, we're only speaking about the Eastern African. We've not even touched about countries that are beyond the Eastern Africa. Another factor that is going to be very, very important to look into when these nations are going to vote for whichever candidate they'll vote for is whether they are Francophony or Anglophony. By Francophony, we mean countries in Africa that speak the French dialect. These include many countries in the western side of Africa. And Anglophony means countries that speak English that are in Africa. And that is, you can say that is across Africa, because there are countries in West Africa that speak English. There are many countries in East Africa, as well as many in South Africa. So these alliances also form part of how nations will vote for the next AUC chairmanship. If you look at what Djibouti has, there are a lot of countries in West Africa and many countries in Central Africa that speak French. These countries will choose to elect a person who speaks French because of the culture, because of the alignments, and of course, because of external forces that will also be part of the interests of voting when it comes to voting for whichever candidate that they will want. Because we understand that other countries beyond Africa, for example, the United States, also France, and China, Russia, will have interest when it comes to whichever candidate that they will want to be fronted for the AUC chairmanship. Africa is of interest to all these countries, and they will present their interest in terms of influence of countries to vote in a particular manner. So if you're talking about Djibouti, we are saying about Senegal, for example. We are talking about countries like Chad, countries like DRC, countries like Mali. The ones that speak French might side with Djibouti. And if you're talking about Raila Odinga and Kenya and Anglophony, we are talking about Nigeria, we are talking about Ghana, we are talking about South Africa, Botswana. All these countries that speak English might want to side with Kenya for the simple fact that it is an Anglophony country and that they align in terms of their perspectives and culture. Another major factor to consider are the lessons that we have learned from the 2020 UNSC vote that pitted Kenya against Djibouti. As I said in another episode that is just on my videos, you can go and check it out. There was a similar match between Kenya and Djibouti regarding voting in the African Union. Kenya won that vote. And now we have a rematch, a similar occasion just 4 years later, about Kenya and Djibouti now going for the AUC chairmanship. And we can learn from that because we had the script of how countries voted and how they managed to campaign across the African states. Kenya won, of course, and it got a lot of support from Anglophony countries across Africa, and particularly South Africa was very, very fundamental to support Kenya and for Kenya to win during the UNSC vote that Kenya went for in 2020. Djibouti got also some support in Africa, especially West Africa, and funny enough, even countries that are close to Kenya, like Somalia, voted for Djibouti. Particularly an interesting country that voted for Kenya and was not expected to vote for Kenya was Eritrea. Asmara voted for Nairobi because of the issues that it has along its borders with Djibouti. And that is how now countries' interest or government's interest come into play when you have such a critical vote. The countries would like to make a statement against another country. And that is why we are talking also about the Democratic Republic of Congo. Regardless of it being in the East African community, it might decide not to vote for Kenya just because of the diplomatic contest that happened in 2023 when Kenyan troops left the DRC. But after that, we've seen President Ruto attending the inauguration of President Tshisekedi, and perhaps those kind of flares were calmed down at that occasion. But we are yet to see the official statement from the Democratic Republic of Congo to support Kenya or to support Kenya's bid at the AUC chairmanship. There are key influencers in Africa. There are important countries that are looked upon when there is any contest that requires Africa to vote. Key countries, for example, Nigeria and South Africa, are very important to look at when they go to vote. A country that will have the support of Nigeria and South Africa is likely to get the majority of votes because these countries influence even those that are around it to vote in a particular way. So Nigeria and South Africa are very important also to decide who is going to be at the helm of the AUC come next year in February. Lastly, the diplomatic outreach is also very important. There is the fact of diplomatic outreach where there are some states that have no definitive support for any candidate. Those are called, or we can call them sway states. For example, Egypt and Algeria. They might decide to vote either way because their voting patterns cannot be defined. We cannot say that simply because they are Anglophone, they will vote for Kenya. We cannot say that simply because they speak Arabic, they will vote for Djibouti. These are countries that can vote in any direction. So these are very, very important states to watch out and consider their input in the coming AUC vote, because they might change or they might be the tipping scale when it comes to voting. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more insightful discussions on African politics and global affairs.